Here in this video, I'm going to cover some information regarding primarily the central figure in the Dying and Rising God mystery rites, but generally discussing that topic. Understand that if you're someone that's found yourself on my channel, obviously I'm the type of person to talk about very deep subjects that have to do generally with social engineering. One of those subjects is Freemasonry. Freemasonry is the world's most open secret, right? Like, the thing is that while many people discuss these types of topics, very few people, if almost anybody, actually discuss the central doctrines of these people and these organizations, why you see these recurrent themes, why you see so many different places in antiquity having practiced one or another form of this cult. There is a reason that these characters that I talk about so often, the Caballeri, serve so much importance. It is because in the mystery cults that were once so prevalent throughout the upper echelons of society, which is carried directly into modern day in the form of secret societies such as the Skull and Bones and Freemasonry and etc., etc., etc. All of these syncretisms that you see throughout world religions are very easily explained when you understand the root of the cult beliefs that they are associated with. And to understand this information is to understand such a significant aspect of today's world and how you could even have a system of shared rituals and connections and secret societal governance throughout the entire world in the first place, right? Okay. With that aside, understand this is no idle information. This is the type of stuff that people just don't seem to focus on. Now, why did I learn about this shit? Well, because I was looking at my astrology. I have an entire video on this. Literally used to say that my secret Italian name was Camillo as a child. There's a whole thing behind it, right? Dreams and astrology, believe it or not. It sounds ridiculous, and yet such a seemingly ridiculous thing, as modernity would tell you, has led me to understand quite literally the hypostasis of world religion, the hypostasis of a major conspiracy that is played out across the world to convince the inhabitants of this world that they live on a fucking mad spiral of a heliocentric universe while magically appearing completely and utter spatially at any given point in time, so on and so forth. Let's get down to the character. So, we're going to start with this reference right here. And this is taken from, I can come back to this page, Princeton University Library. I think it's Richard Payne Knight. Symbolical Language in Ancient Art and Mythology. Richard Payne Knight. Okay. Allegorical symbols and stories explained in the mysteries. The symbol of the ram was, it seems, explained in the Eleusinian mysteries, and the nature and history of the Pelasgian Mercury in those of Samothrace. The device on whose coins is his emblem, either of the ram or the cock, and where he was distinguished by the mystic title Casmillus or Cadmillus, of which probably the Latin word Camillus and the Greek name of the fabulous hero Cadmus are equally abbreviations. For the stories of this hero being married to Harmonia, the daughter of Mars and Venus, and of both him and his wife being turned into serpents are clearly allegorical, and it is more probable that the colony which occupied is a picture of Hermes being drawn by the rooster, Cadmus and Harmonia. Thebes were called Cadmeans from the title of their deity than from the name of their chief. The palm tree symbol. The Egyptian Mercury or Thoth carried a branch of palm in his hand, which his priests also wore in their sandals, probably as a badge of their consecration to immortality, for this tree is mentioned in the Orphic poems as proverbial for longevity. Going back up here. Herodotus. The peculiarity which the Greeks observe in their statues of Mercury, they did not derive from the Egyptians, but from the Pelasgi. Whoever has been initiated into the mysteries of the Kabir will understand what I mean. And like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, when conversations come up about some of the most poorly understood in ancient civilizations, what's one of the first people that comes up? The Pelasgians, right? You start talking about the Aryans, the Pelasgians, the Hyperboreans, so on and so forth. Like, there's a reason that these things get talked about in conspiracy theory circles. It's because authors such as Herodotus, some of the father of history, so called, they're the ones that talk about these people. Plato is the one that talks about Atlantis. You know what I mean? Like, okay, anyway. So, the Samothracians received these mysteries from the Pelasgi, who before they went to live in Attica were dwellers in Samothrace, and imparted their religious ceremonies to the inhabitants. The Athenians, then, who were the first of all the Greeks to make their statues of Mercury in this way, learned the practice from the Pelasgians, and he's talking about its ithyphallic nature because it's associated with the cock, right? Like, the cock is sacred to Hermes, the rooster, but there's like literally the phallic imagery as well. Phallic Hermes statue. Let's see if that fucking there's one. Like, there's literal, like, it almost looks like a joke, like statues of like flying penises and shit like that. Like, it's a fertility cult, amongst other things. It would be a terrible disservice to reduce it down to, just a fertility cult. But that's the whole thing. The dying and rising god, along with the great mother, of whom the dying and rising god is the consort. That's the significance. Taking a quick break to mention the ancient Sumerian connection of this tradition, which relates to the fall of man, as you see in current day Christianity. Let's go to Mythology of All Races. Again, this is from Stephen Herbert Langdon, who is he's one of the preeminent Assyriologists of the 20th century, or late 19th century, perhaps. I have not seen a single other person talk about this aspect, but like I said, I follow astrology, right? Well, on the day that I'm born, the sun aligns with Antares, like literally with Sidral aligns with Antares. So I spent 2 or 3 years looking up, trying to find out about like Antares and learn, because I was just looking at my own astrology, right? So I ended up coming here under the last title. She was wife of her son Nesu, dialectic Lisi, who's often said to be a female. There's a whole debacle behind this thing right here about Lisi and this gender swap, and it's actually it's a very large topic all in itself that was seen all across the board, and they swap back and forth and so on and so forth. It's a whole thing. Most times, the point that I'm getting at is when you look at Lisi, and I'm saying this because it threw me off and made it a real pain in the ass for months, because I had the answer right in front of me, right? Because Lisi has a male form, who is Nesu, right? Which is the god, the dying and rising god, associated with Antares. This is the ancient Sumerian version of this tradition, right? It's how far back this shit goes. The god Nesu is known almost entirely by his star Antares in Scorpio, also identified with Nebo, who, by the Mandaeans, is equated 1-for-1 with Jesus. This relates to the whole holy island of Dilmun, the 33 artificial islands that I'm sure is sacred to Freemasonry. This is why in that tradition, right, Lisi's spouse, named Aquila, is at Dilmun the spouse of Inshak, who is the 8th of the chthonic deities sent by the mother goddess. Do you see how old this fucking tradition is? Like, I'm not making this shit up. So Anyway, this god Nesu is known almost entirely by his star on Taurus and Scorpio. And then comes down the myth of the mother goddess and her son and husband who died yearly and descended for a time to the underworld to be rescued and restored to his wife and mother. Generally appears in Sumerian, especially Babylonian religion, Eric and the cult of Anini and Nebuzi, Ishtar and Tammuz, but the older form of this myth in Sumerian seems to have been associated with the cult of Ninturn and her sire Ru and her son and husband Nesu. Okay? So, this dude, they say down here, man, the mortal one, whose life, blood, and flesh sprang from a god himself, walks forever in the shadow of death, as does his divine brother, the god Lil or Nesu. Right? Because these are the gods, they say in here, they charged, they designated a god to be slain, the dying and rising god, whose life essence would serve as the basis for humanity. This is like the dreamer and the dreamed, you know what I mean? So that's the whole thing right here in this little bit of information. That's how profound it is. And that's why you see this slaying of the god that otherwise, without this context, just seems fucking nonsensical and strange. It's based on the original concept of man springing from the lifeblood of a god, right? That gave his life for the human race. This is the Jesus tradition, right? So, okay, so coming back to this area, we see Scholiast upon Apollonius Rhodius, Book 1. They are initiated into the mysteries of the Kabirian Samothrace, whose names Menasius tells us there are 4 in number: Axioeros, Axiochirsa, Axiochirsos. Axioeros is Demeter, Axiochirsa is Persephone, and Axiochirsos is Hades or Pluto. The 4th, placed in the number, is Casmillus, who is Hermes. So, Cadmillus, and this is from Lycophon. Cadmillus, the Boeotian Hermes, or Mercury, the scholium upon the same, says by Syncope Cadmus. These annotations are clear as mud. Their most prominent idea is a theocracy, by which several deities, as they are popularly understood, are reduced to a few personages. Cadmillus is made to include the Theban serpent god, Cadmus, the Thoth of Egypt, the Hermes of the Greeks, and the Ameph or Asclepius of the Alexandrians and Phoenicians. Okay, so all this time, like as the months progressed, and I was struggling to understand, like most people do, I'm sure, how could so many personages fit into one character? How does Thoth relate to Eshmun? Or how does Thoth relate to Attis? It's like, without this context, you see, it would never make sense to anybody. And all I had to do was look for information on my birth star to find all of it. Like, what the fuck is that about? You know what I mean? The other Kabirians embrace the gods of the universe, of generation and destruction, whether represented by a star Demeter, Cybele, or Isis, not accepting Europe and Persephone, also Osiris, Pluto, and the judges of the underworld. It is hardly prudent to give an opinion where men so able and accomplished have differed. Nevertheless, it appears from the comparing of evidence that Kabirian, like the other sacred orgies, were somewhat changed in different countries, but were substantially alike. They involve the leading idea of the Eleusinian and Sabazian mysteries, and a portion of the mythological history. The same dances upon the supposed planetary system, wailing for the firstborn, dividing and occupying of the earth, the introduction of the arts, characterize these rites. Okay, what else we got here? So, the Samothracians had a sacred legend about Hermes, which is explained in their mysteries. The sacred legend is perhaps no other than the one spoken of by Cicero, that Hermes was the son of Coelus and Dies, and that Proserpine desired to embrace him. The same is perhaps alluded to by Papricius when he says that Mercury, or Hermes, had connections with Brimo, who is probably the goddess of fairy worshipped at Athens, Sicyon, and Argos, whom some identify with Proserpine and others with Hecate or Artemis. So here he's just discussing this constant connection with Hermes and Artemis, with the dying and rising god and the mother goddess. That is the consort, as has been seen all the way back from the worship of ancient Sumer in the form of Nesu and Nersag, or Ninsekila. So here, and this is from The Origin of Pagan Idolatry. This last one was taken from some old proceedings, some other. This one is The Origin of Pagan Idolatry, Stanley Faber. This explains more context on why Antares specifically, like why this connection with Mars. Why does Antares have the connotation of akin to Mars, or the same or equal to Mars, and why is it associated with military? Like for me, for instance, as I would, like I said, like that was my entire search, was understanding my association with this star. I had a dream years ago, and it was that I was this star, and I didn't know what star it was, and that was what led to the whole thing. And then like my entire life, my entire family, everything about my family is military. So I mean, you know what I mean. So sure enough, Harmonia was not only reckoned the wife of Cadmus, but she was likewise thought to have been at once the daughter and the consort of Mars, to whom she bore the fabulous race of the Amazons. The fact was this: Mars, or Ares, was the same person as Cadmus or Buddha, and Harmonia stands to him in the double relation of daughter and wife, precisely as Illa does to Buddha or Minya. And see, this is the Odin connection, right? Like, this is how Odin starts to come into the picture. For Camillus, Casmillus, and Cadmillus were all, as it is well known, the same name somewhat differently pronounced, in that the name was a title of Mercury or Buddha, the same in the substance as the word Cadmus in the Oriental Kadam or Kadam. Hence we also find that another of his titles was Tos or Tooth, for the Cushites of Arabia worshipped him under the name of Tos Ares, and showed evidently that the god whom they venerated was Tot, or Toth or Tooth or Buddha, by representing him under the prevailing hermetic figure of the square black stone. All right, and that's why you have instances such as the Kaaba, right? Like, that's the symbolism behind the black cube in conspiracy theories. They relate it to, any number of things. Like in Keylontics, they'll say it's like some type of like artificial matrix cube, or that. There's all sorts of weird theories about this shit. But the stone of masonry, right? The stone symbolizes Jesus. This is why they have that saying. I think it's Isaiah, perhaps, but it's like the stone that the builders left out. One sec. So yeah, the stone that the builders rejected. Matthew 21, the stone which the builders rejected, the same has become the head of the corner. This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. That's where this tradition comes from, because this deity, Eshmun, or whatever name you want to call him, he was symbolized by the cube. So that is the significance of the black cube. That's why. I mean, as weird as this sounds, right? Like, one of my favorite bands has always been Hail the Sun, and a couple years ago when I started learning about the black cube, you can't make this shit up, dude. Look at this shit. I started learning about this about 2 years ago, and this is the music video they released. So don't worry about the audio, but this is the shit they released while I'm looking up the black cube. A whole music video centered around the fucking black cube. Isn't that wild? And it's about feeling like a puppeteer, like you're trying to control something that you can't bring near, like a dreamer that can't quite fully control the dream. You know what I mean? Like, anyway, so there's that. And then you have finally, let's go to R. Brown June. This dude always pops up. Camillus. Okay. Camillus, son of Cabir and Hephaestus. Harmonia and Cadmus, Casmillus, or Camillus are connected with them. Their numbers, though variously stated, appear to have been either 3, 7, or 8. Thus, Hephaestus, Camillus, 3 Cabiri, and 3. Okay. And then the word, or no, it was Cadmiel. Cadmiel, he who stands before El. Cadmus, the eastern Cadmus at Samothrace, therefore is regarded from a Phoenician point of view as representing thought. So what there ends up being is this idea that this being is the like the actual embodiment, the countenance of, I think this was the, all right, yeah, Cadmiel, he who stands before the face of God, according to the Chaldean mode of designation, equivalent to the messenger of the countenance in the Bible, the herald messenger, Hermes Mercury, Cadmillus, and Cadmus, who is Hermes. So, yeah. I know to some individuals, this stuff, to most individuals, they have absolutely no idea about any of this stuff. But I mean, what I'm talking about here is literally like the basis of religion. You know, like it's not a small deal. It's not a small deal. All right, that's all I got. Much love.